Well, it's 11:15.
Yep.
You ready to kick off?
Let's kick it off.
All right.
You want an intro or you want me to?
I'll go ahead and do it.
This generated
On the
active stuff, right?
Welcome everybody, both locally here at Harmonic and through Teams, to this week's episode, or this month's episode of FileMaker Pug User Group Dallas. Your co-hosts are myself, Greg Price, Taylor, as everybody probably knows, and Fred. Fred is not here. Fred's busy doing some control work. I hear he has some major issues he's having to deal with right now. So we're going to get into today's meeting here, but before we start, I'm going to have Taylor. Do you have any other business that we need to deal with?
Well, there's some European Engage conferences coming up. I understand the Antwerp one's registration open on Monday. So if you want to go to Engage in Antwerp.
Claris has announced that the recordings for the sessions are going to be available soon. I don't know what soon means, so keep an eye on your inboxes for that. All right, the subject of today is the Engage wrap-up, and we're going to be conducting an open forum. I'm going to be prompting, but for the most part, it's going to be discuss what you experienced, what you thought, and what you took away from this year's Engage in Austin. So to start with, I wanted to make sure everybody was aware anything discussed in the keynote that is not an available Claris offering right now. In other words, it's not currently part of the feature set of the current version of FileMaker 2024. Should not be discussed here. And that is just basically, if you were in the keynote and you saw information that came out of the keynote that is about future features or future products, those should not be discussed here because they're still covered by the NDA, which is part of, I think, the agreement that you made when you bought your ticket to Engage for this year. We can approach those in general terms, but specifics will get you in touch with the mothership. Second is, this is an open forum. The presentation will have prompts only, but any questions or topics you'd like to bring up, please feel free to do so as needed. And it can be easy to talk over one another in a situation like this, especially considering we have a bunch of people in conference, but we also have people who are accessing via Teams. And I want to make sure that everybody's able to hear each other. So in Teams, you have a little hand wavy thing, and Taylor has agreed to keep an eye on that to make sure that if you're waving your hand, that we go ahead and allow you some time to ask questions or bring up subjects. So to kick that off, I'm just going to go ahead and move on. First thing, and obviously this is a very big deal. Anybody who went to Claris Engage this year knows that AI integration was a very big part of it. So prompts, thoughts, ideas. What are your thoughts on Claris's direction with AI integrations? Is there anything you think is missing from the Claris AI strategy, and what did you learn from any AI breakout sessions that you took? Anyone?
No, but I have a question.
Sure.
When you're talking about integrating AI into Claris, it's within, because I have no clue about AI. So it's something that you're implementing to be within that app?
Yes. There's two different ways, actually. Go on, I'll let Taylor answer.
Yeah, you're in essence, you're making API calls. It's like calling a web page or integrating any other API. FileMaker is not an LLM. So you are having to make a call to the other one, for example, OpenAI, and submit information and get a result back through a RESTful connection. It's like you in the insert from URL step that we've been using all along.
I'm just now reaching that step.
Right. But they've included some tools to help get through the security and make the connection a little easier and smoother for submitting things. But basically, it's just an API where it's not that undifferent than Google. I submit a request. Give me all purple hippos, and when Google returns a bunch of pictures of purple hippos. Well, you're just calling an LLM. And some of the things are we're being able to support more LLMs. So there's more than OpenAI out there. There's Grok. And so the idea is kind of like you have different search engines you can get on the internet, Google, Bing, Yahoo, whatever. Well, LLMs are the same way. And the thing that FileMaker's doing is giving you the tools to connect to them, but it really isn't telling you how to use them. So that's the whole next step. Okay, we can make the connection, but how to ask it, how to provide it information, and the last thing is about AIs always give you an answer. Doesn't mean the answer makes any sense, but it always gives you an answer.
Getting
So
better.
part of the big thing is figuring out if you got an answer that makes sense. So.
Looks like we got a hands up from Steve. What do you got, Steve?
Yeah, I thought I'd just chip in generally and say a couple of things on an AI topic. First of all, I would say that as a company leader in an organization that is looking at AI from a lot of different directions, both Claris and non-Claris in general, I appreciated what I saw from Claris. This is going to be a very general statement, but I mean it positively. I think that they have been taking a look at AI and AI integration in a very business-like and orderly fashion. And that's sometimes hard to do with the topic of AI, which is kind of a giant bulldozer that is eating the world right now. So I have appreciated Claris's one foot in front of another approach. And I think both from things that are in market now and things that they showed us that are coming, I really believe that a lot of it is sensible and is going to be actionable for valuable and intentional business purposes over the course of the next year. So from my seat, I appreciate a lot of what we saw, much of which we can't talk about in detail based on the suggestions at the beginning of the conversation here, but some of which we can. And I'll just say that one of the topics that is near and dear to our heart is the ability to use models that are private so that we're not shipping our data out to a public LLM. I think that was well covered. There were a couple sessions on that. I know my guys attended those. And I've just gotten the approval 2 days ago to stand up an LLM and start doing vector embeddings for one of my most PII sensitive customers, right? So I think the fact that Claris is at a point where the message is out there, they've given us the hooks to make connections to private LLMs where we're not shipping data to public models. I think that's very important. And it's not always the right choice, but it's a good option to have. And it's one that we're going to start actually generating billable hours against starting immediately. So that's a positive for us.
Excellent.
Yeah, and then I've got another thing to add. So what I'm sharing is I don't believe these features are in the current, well, they are not in the current release of FileMaker. I believe they're in the ETS, but everything I'm about to say was not in the keynote. It was in one of the under the hood sessions. So I'm assuming it is safe to say.
Otherwise, Eric,
Yeah.
it's on you.
Yeah. But according to all these notes were taken during that under the hood session. My keynote notes are in a different note. So one of the features that I was unaware of, maybe it's currently already in the current production version of FileMaker, or it is coming in the ETS, but we've talked about semantic search on text. Apparently, there's also the option to do semantic search on images. Which
that is in market now.
Yeah, so
Actually,
yeah, okay, good. So I thought, gosh, like that's pretty cool. I couldn't immediately think of a use case where I immediately wanted to use that right now, but I was like, it's really kind of cool. Also, it's already in market is when we're looking at embedding vectors, the functions to add and subtract embeddings. And that gets really interesting when you want to start doing some more creative math with the results of your embeddings and what those mean and how you can do different sorts of regressions and statistics and all sorts of other mathy things, which I personally find really interesting as Daisy moves further away from me. So that's cool. Now, what I'm really excited about, which is not in the current market version, but they are giving us a script step to train your own ML model from within FileMaker on your own data. So a few years ago, they gave us the ability to leverage an existing ML model and produce a result from an input using a model, but it was really kind of manual if you wanted to build your own model off of your own data. And now they are giving us a way to do that basically build a regression using embedding vectors, using the, let's see, random forest algorithm was the name that was on the slide. So you're effectively able to take a set of your data that is where you've embedded a certain thing and you're correlating it with a certain response, and it will train a model based on whatever like your data is, and then you can start leveraging that model in other areas. So I thought that was really cool. I kind of want to dig into that personally, because that really, I think, makes the ML features much more accessible to all of us.
This is Scott Schleich. Y'all hear me?
Yep.
I am new to AI, and while I've paired with developers that have done it, they're really handling the heavy lifting, and I don't use AI a lot. So I think for the newbies in the room to this, a great way to get started is to just use ChatGPT for daily things, right? Like I did a thing of what sort of plants would grow on the Texas coast. But then I find it and said, make that drought tolerant, or find it and make that leafy. And the results were intriguing, but I think using that outside of FileMaker world helps you learn about the prompts and the powers of AI. And then also, I think it gets you thinking about what are the business use cases that this might have meaning to your customers about. So just want to make that call out.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Did anybody have any thoughts about where they see Claris going with this? They talked a little bit about it, and in general terms, obviously we can approach that, but maybe not specifics. Do you think that they're moving in the right direction? Do you think they're moving fast enough? Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I think they're moving along at adequate speed. We certainly have a whole bunch that's in the ETS that we can't talk about right now, but a whole bunch is coming. So they are very active on it. The limitations we have right now is a lot of things that we're wanting in AI are such things as copy this layout and make it more business-like, or write me a script that does this invoicing process for me. And right now, we don't have ways in FileMaker to have scripting or something touch into the CSS of a layout, or to manage a database and make changes to it, those things. And those are things that they're supposedly working on how that will happen in the future. And of course, that's when FileMaker really open up to AI, when we can use AI to actually do actual edits to scripts and things like that. Right now, I will say I do give OpenAI, write me a FileMaker script that does understand FileMaker. But I mean, get back to, we talked about what are your results? And sometimes when I'll be honest with you, I use the MBS plugin a lot, and it has a lot of really cool features, but they're not native to FileMaker. So I'm always trying to find a way to do it in FileMaker without having to do that. And so I would submit things for it. And one example was it gave me back this wonderful script. Yes, it'll do it. And what I didn't find out is you got halfway through it, it's called hallucinations, where it makes up a function, and it actually sounds very FileMaker-like. You're like, oh, I didn't know that function. It sounds like, in other words, because it all is going the FileMaker lingo, and then not until you try to implement it, you realize it actually exists. So you have to be evaluating what it gives you back.
It's like one of those function names that you find on the test.
That's right.
It sounds very FileMaker-like.
So you have to, but I want to see at some point where I'm telling it to go through and update all the themes, or do some things to layouts for me, or to go through scripts or write scripts
You
for me.
want the AI to be the internal tool, not something you can incorporate necessary only.
Well, I will be the project manager of the tool. It will give me things. I will edit them. So most all AI does not give you final answers. It almost always requires you to edit or do something with it. For example, the only commercial AI thing I've done with Michael Wallace, and this is a client called Our Calling. They work with the homeless in downtown Dallas. And so they have these counseling things where they have all these notes that they take about the circumstances of the people, whether they are on drugs or family situation. So they literally have all these notes they write. And then the idea is you're trying to get someone off the street. So if you have all these notes about them, you're trying to place them in placement agencies to get them off the streets. And you have like 1,000 placement agencies. And we use AI to go through all the notes plus the information about the person, the biographical stuff, and compare that to the placement agencies. And it's great for that, but it doesn't give you an exact answer. What it does is it narrows it down to say 5 or 10 of the agencies that are the best. And then you have a human consultation that looks at them and decides which is best. But likewise, when you're asking AI to write a script for you, you can't count on there not being hallucinations in there, or you're not having to edit some things, or you didn't give the AI proper instructions. And sometimes using an AI often is learning how to ask the question. That's going to be one of the big tricks in the future, is knowing how to ask the question to get the results you want.
Right.
And
I'm still learning that with Google, so.
oh, all right. And it will be the same.
Same
type of
concept.
thing. Yes, same exact.
It's semantic.
Yeah, I don't know to what extent when ChatGPT, for instance, just makes up a function that doesn't exist, I always make sure to correct it and say that's not a function, and the prompt, the response that comes back is something like, thanks for that. You're right. Here's how I would do it instead. So I don't know how much of that feedback or how long it takes for that feedback to kind of get rolled back into the model. But I would probably just suggest at least that if it does make something up, that you tell it, you make that up, try again, basically, in order to help improve it, because there's not nearly as much FileMaker scripting that's been ingested compared to other languages, where there's billions and billions of lines of code in other languages on GitHub and things that have been scraped and imported. One thing I'll also say about generating scripts is that if you try to do this, you realize you can't there's a copy button in the upper right corner, and you cannot paste like when you ask it for other solutions in other languages.
Well, that
However,
button's only if you have it.
there's
Not everybody has that.
Yeah, I was just chatting up a friend during one of the breaks, and I mentioned that to him, and he said, you should think about saying, okay, hey, this script is in good shape. Give me an XML representation of it that I can copy and paste. I've tried that without any kind of additional, like, here's an example of a code snippet in XML. So it didn't work right out of the box, but I imagine if you provide it a script step in XML format that is pasteable, and then feed it a generated script, that you'll be able to paste in. So I'm curious to try that out.
I want to share a story. This is actually Paul's story, but he has a really bad cold and I don't want to make him cough for everyone. But he shared with me yesterday, and this is to share that I think Scott's idea is great. My use of ChatGPT has been limited. I've used it, but it's not my first thought. It's after I've spent time manipulating something that I finally go, yeah, I should have, or I could. But anyway, Paul used it to write a SQL statement. And that for some may sound like a very simple thing, but if it's at all complicated, it gets complicated for us FileMaker developers sometimes to remember that is empty is not the same as not null, or is null, right? And so he was sharing with me or actually posted to everyone the conversation he was having with ChatGPT. And it did a really nice job when he said he specifically said he wanted to write a SQL statement for FileMaker. And it fed back basically an outline of the information that it would need. Provide me the table name, the field name, are there any wheres or sorts or et cetera. Basically gave him an outline. And then after he got the SQL query, which was perfect and had no problems, he asked it a question about the result because he was looking for a date. And it was maximum date that he was looking for. And he asked about the format of that. Would that be in SQL format or FileMaker format? And it gave this really elegant answer about how it would be in whatever format his FileMaker was using, which was wrong.
Totally wrong.
Totally wrong. And he told it was wrong, and he got another very cordial and grateful response for pointing out the error. So point is, it's very friendly and it does a pretty good job, but you do have to keep an eye on it. You have to look at the results that it gave you. So the suggestion that you could ask it to redo your layout and then just have it interact with FileMaker is something that would make me very nervous. Because I would want, show me this, let me validate it, give it to me in a form that I can copy and give me a way to bring it in and then to insert that.
Yeah,
in the
like
file.
Taylor says, you can't take it at face value.
Exactly.
It has to be evaluated.
You do have to check the results that you get.
I also included a comment in the script step that identified this execute SQL statement came from ChatGPT, just in case that ever comes in handy in future troubleshooting. When you
Yeah.
know this came from the AI. Okay.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Make sure that you are giving some opportunity.
But then I told
Yes,
the
that's all right.
ChatGPT I had done that, and it thanked me for the shout out.
A couple of thoughts along these lines. One is that I think Claris is very aware of the issue that Brian articulated, that there are not as many lines of FileMaker, Calc Engine, or scripting code out there as there are lines of PHP or React, or pick your flavor of other language. And just as a result, that puts them at a disadvantage, and they are actively working on that, using the resources available to them, including the resources available to them via their parent company. And I think that's a really important point, that they're aware of that. And they are aware of that and working to leverage it both for the good of end users, but specifically for the good of us developers. And one of the big ways that they're doing that is they have taken the development of the patch tool off hold. That is in motion, that is fully staffed again. And that will be one of the ways that we will be able to ask an agent to do something for us and have that thing be blended into our FileMaker solution. So I think that was a real positive step in my mind, was to see that they have that in full motion, and that is being driven by the desire to have AI help us work faster and smarter as developers.
One of the sessions I went to was Chris Ippolite was giving a session on some examples of business use case. So he was going through stuff that he had done with some of his clients with the current market version of FileMaker. So just using the existing AI features, none of the new stuff. And one of the use cases was with 3M. And the short of it was they were using, I believe it was ChatGPT, but they were leveraging an LLM to produce marketing copy for their tens, hundreds of thousands of different products. But they were having ChatGPT generate that by referencing 3M's own internal kind of database of product information and product specifications, as well as their marketing style guide. So that way ChatGPT would be generating content in the style that the marketing department had said, this is the voice of 3M, here's how we're going to state things, here's how we're going to use adverbs or not use adverbs, here's the abbreviations we're going to use for things. So that was really cool. And then he had a separate LLM evaluate the marketing copy that the first LLM generated to evaluate it against their internal legal documentation. Because everything that they write has to go through their legal departments, that way they don't get sued. That makes sense. So before these various marketing claims ever got in front of a human in the legal department, which everything would have to go through a human, they had an LLM evaluate those statements by referencing the internal legal guide from the legal department to identify problematic claims and marketing copy, thereby sending those back to his team before legal ever looked at them. So I thought that kind of whole use case was very interesting and got my mind going of how you can leverage these LLMs to produce bespoke content for you, but also protect against that, the hallucination, and intentionally put various human review and intervention points along the way. So you're never trusting, and this is a point that Chris Ippolite reiterated over and over again, is that you never trust the AI implicitly. Like you need humans along in the process, but but that doesn't mean that the AI doesn't bring a significant amount of value and time savings.
When you ask an AI question, a lot of people evaluate the quality of the result by using the cosine result. Basically, it's a number between -1 and 1. And the closer to 1, the more it's probably a good answer. And closest to -1, it's the opposite answer. And 0 is no correlation. But that's for the whole response that you get back. And most of us want to, if a lot of questions we're asked in database or dashboarding type things are going to involve trying to look at certain things that were returned and evaluating whether those are actually reasonable or reliable or not. And if that is something that you want to do, there's a guy named Steve Lane with Soliant Consulting who he did a thing called turning soup into structure using AI to process unorganized data and basically to how to evaluate the individual pieces within it. And he's actually got some really creative ways to do it. So if that ends up being something that you're trying to validate AI data, go listen to Steve Lane's presentation when it comes out.
That was an excellent session.
Yeah. That's what I heard.
My best result as of like what I've been able to use the last several weeks or a few months, I've gotten the best usable results with the least amount of cleanup required for things that go in the calc window. Primarily while statements or nested while statements that can get confusing in a hurry, or sometimes end up as being too verbose. So sometimes I'll feed it something that works, but it's a little ugly. And I'll just ask it, hey, can you make this more concise? Or can you suggest ways to not be as repetitive? Something like that. And it does great for stuff like that. And you can copy and paste that directly. So as far as what you can use today, biggest sort of bang for the buck, I've had the best result for calc window result.
Right.
Calc window inputs.
So notice 3/4 of the Engage was about AI. Great. Also notice there wasn't even a single security session. So
Yeah.
I don't know what that says, but anyway. But I will say on the non-AI, if you want to go back and look at the review of things of one, there's a guy that his name is Kaz McLemore, K-A-Z, then M-C-L-A-M-O-R-E from FX Professional Services. He does this Beyond the Basics, 100 Essential Tips and Tricks for Developers. And the thing that I like about it is he brings up a lot of tips and tricks that we all use, but he then often explains under the hood limitations or advantages of things like when you wanted to use insert for looping versus just set a variable because it has to reset every time, whereas insert just appends it to the end. And so things that you have to loop a million times, that makes a massive difference in performance. And so he goes through a whole bunch of, it basically his goal was to get through 100 of those in a quick session. So he's bam. But I promise you, you'll look at things that you say, I know that function. I thought I knew it well. And he added something to it that I did not know that helps me better use it. So if you're interested in just general tips to help you out with a lot of stuff, Jim, I think it'd be real good for you.
Gotcha.
All right, well, the next item that I had for prompt, there was a big push by Claris this year to promote the relevance and usefulness of both Studio and Connect. And I wanted to get everybody's thoughts on that. Do you feel like these products are becoming more applicable to customers' needs or your own? And did you attend any sessions for these where they did promote these products, either through demonstrations or under the hood? And what did you think of those?
I did attend one of those sessions and I was very impressed. It looks to me like they're coming along very nicely. They've added some new features both to Claris Studio as well as Connect. And some of these just dropped like the week before Engage.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to getting in on those. There's now a Claris Connect hook for Claris Studio that's going to allow you to use Claris Connect to better coordinate the data between Studio and FileMaker Pro. So I'm looking forward to getting involved in some of that and learn more about it.
Yep. Team, go ahead, Dale.
Brad's approach on this is we're going to bring in Studio, we're going to do Connect, and they're going to be totally separate products, and we're going to have a whole bunch of new customer sets, and it's really not even a subset of FileMaker or even a feature of FileMaker, and they're going to do their own thing. And what they spend $6 million on Connect, and I don't know what all they did on Studio. At one point, Peter said that Studio is going to replace FileMaker, and we all know where these things have gone. The new theme that is happening now, the spin that's happening is they're going to make this a FileMaker centric company, and these are going to be features of FileMaker. And this is what I think it should have been all along. Connect is a feature of FileMaker, and particularly as long as you're just connecting to FileMaker things, other FileMaker servers or studio or stuff like that, there won't even be additional cost to it. It's just be a feature, just like you have scripting features and stuff like that. And I think that that's a win. Studio is, if there isn't even business automation, if they got validations now, and oh, cool, we can connect to certain other authentications too. But there's the nice thing about it, it is web centric. So for designing things, it's better than our web direct that we've had in the past, but it's not. It's still without the business logic, not ready to take over any of my web direct pages that I have end user clients getting on yet. So I hope it will someday, but I will say I went to the session and one of the examples I said is, okay, if you have Studio, one of the things that Studio can do is it can do like an ESS connection in FileMaker to the Studio, and kind of like we do ESS for ODBC connections. And so we're familiar with that. Oh, that sounds good. He mentioned those as it is right now. If you do that and you have more than say 100 records, it pretty much chokes on it. I'm like, I don't do anything with less than 100 records. So there's just so many things about, I see potential in Studio, but it is so beta to me right now without the business automations, it's integration of FileMaker support. Now they say they're going to be bringing this syncing that'll make that all go fast. But what's here right now is I'm still very disappointed in Studio. I see some places for Connect. I've mostly not used Connect because basically they wanted to charge a lot of money for it, and I know how to write an API call. So why would I want to put something in the middle and charge a bunch of money for it? Well, now that it becomes a FileMaker feature, maybe I'll be more interested in it than I have in the past. So I'm warming up to that a little more. I'm not warmed up to the Studio yet, but they're trying to make something of it, and I guess it'll be interesting to see where it goes. But it's interesting, that was probably the number 2 push over AI and Engage.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious, I have yet to do a single Studio integrations. And I've only tested Connect. I haven't actually done an actual client integration. So I don't know. What do you think, Brian?
I didn't go to the session you're referring to, and I don't know if the additional training days from Thursday, do those get posted like the sessions? get
No,
posted?
maybe not.
Those are, okay.
They don't film those at all.
That's a shame. Todd Geist had his training day on Thursday, and one of the covered about 100 things, but it was great. One of them was about Connect and webhooks and stuff. And I sort of periodically dip my toes into the Connect space and see what's there. And every few months I'll take a look. But when we all logged in the class to add some of the newer webhooks that Paul was referring to, I was pleasantly surprised by just the number of things, the number of connectors that are now available in there. They're still adding to it, obviously, but it's a much, much bigger list than the last time I remember taking a look under the hood there. So I'm super happy about that.
Yeah. I found that it seemed like the connections, the ability to operate within the FileMaker space for Connect is a lot more robust now than it was the last time I had a look at it, which is arguably it's been a couple of years.
And if you use Automatic, you have that with your server, you can have the webhooks that then calls the Connect and does it. So I hope Claris is thinking about, we need to buy that, integrate that into FileMaker. If you don't know about Automatic, go back. There was a presentation we did. When was it? A year ago?
Yeah.
More than that. Todd came here and did it. Or go see one of the new presentations. It's now free.
We use it all the time here.
Yep.
And I use it on personal projects. I was doing that before I even came to Harmonic, just certain features like the data API token proxy and stuff like that, which
Right. So you
greatly
don't have
simplifies
that,
network calls.
you don't have to do the
Steve Madison.
OAuth 2 thing. So, and it also has built-in webhooks. A lot of things that we want to do that we've been having to do outside of FileMaker that can be done right on our FileMaker server now. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think overall I was pleased with what I saw of both Studio and Connect. I may have said this to some of you, but I don't know if I've said it broadly. I get this sense that Claris is long-term hoping that Studio will be like their product. Doesn't mean FileMaker won't be there, but that Studio has just a much greater potential of a market share. And I think they're always going to be limited by how specific you want your solution to be. And that's probably where FileMaker will come in long term. But for a lot of things that users want, you could either do it with Studio right now, or something that's probably pretty reachable for Claris to do in the near future. And so I felt a great deal of optimism just like engaging with that. And I don't know how much has been announced publicly, so I'll just have to say in general terms, I am also excited about some of the pricing model that could be coming with Claris Connect. And Brian referenced that training that was on Thursday. It was interesting and helpful to be able to work more with Connect. It was a little bit odd to discover how poor dark mode was supported. Yeah.
I have comments on this topic. Actually, this was probably the thing that I spent the most time on personally at Engage, because I've been looking for the opportunity to embrace Studio. Claris often asks the partners, hey, give us success stories, but they always want those success stories in the last few years to include Studio and our Connect.
Yeah.
And that's been really difficult to come up with a success story that includes Studio and our Connect. And I would say my hope would be that 2025 is the year where I have a tremendous success story leveraging Studio. I feel like they're finally there. And I would say for 3 reasons. Number one, they fixed their licensing model, and that is public information. And so now Studio and Connect are included with your FileMaker license at an initial level, right? And I think that's key. I think it's dumb that it wasn't always that way, but nonetheless, here we are. It's finally that way. So I think that's really important. The second big thing that was both announced and further hinted at is that between FileMaker and Studio, there's a lot of work going on in how to make those things work better together. So Taylor's example is exactly right. We really haven't had a good way to put a Studio table on a FileMaker graph and use it effectively together. They're going to fix that. And little birdie might have told me that the way they're going to fix that is a thing called Kafka. We happen to be working with Kafka right now to move data at speed between FileMaker and Postgres to support AI integrations, right? So Kafka is a super powerful tool. I'm glad they're making that choice. The other thing is that Claris, both with Studio and with FileMaker, is making a hard pivot to OData. OData is the way forward, not data API. And the way Claris is going to allow FileMaker to access a world of additional possibilities, including, for instance, Postgres. Right now, if you've got a Linux server, you can't make Postgres an ESS object because Linux doesn't support Postgres, and it's never going to. The way you're going to get a Postgres table on your FileMaker graph is through Studio via OData, right? And via these pipelines. So there's a lot of stuff that's out right now, and there's a lot of stuff that's coming out imminently. And I think it's finally there. So in answer to your question of, do we feel like there's real business? I will say that for me, I have also, in the past week, just sold my first major Studio project, and we're going to be using it as a web form device because they finally support external identity providers. For me, that was the big block no-go until they did that. They finally have done that. And actually, with 2 customers, we're going to be leveraging it. With one customer, it'll be Active Directory, will be the external identity provider via Azure. And with another customer, we'll use a custom IDP using Okta and SAML, so we can talk to a custom database of users, right? But in both cases, that gives me the ability to have Studio be on an existing website, stick it in an iframe, single sign-on through, know who's sticking their cursor in that field, and then do something useful with that data accordingly. So I feel like Studio is finally at the point where it's useful to us, where it's potentially business viable. So that's my take on Studio.
To Steve's point on the OData stuff, I'm super happy just on a personal level about that. I've been using OData for a long time now. And I would highly recommend, John Renfrew did an OData session. It was the first session of Engage that I went to immediately after the keynote. It was excellent, and he does a deep dive into existing features and a bunch of stuff that's probably ETS that I won't talk about. But it was excellent. So if you feel like you're at all behind on OData, given that as Steve said, it's the way forward, I would highly recommend that you watch John's session because you'll get up to speed and feel way more confident about using it.
Well, one thing that's a real benefit about OData, the RESTful API is great for like a lot of web page type things where you have small sets of data coming. OData is great if you have large sets of data. So if you want to ever work with large sets, OData is the way to go. If you're doing small sets, just web pages, the RESTful data API is still good for that. Just realize it's not scalable like OData is.
Okay, we have a hand up in conference room number 3, apparently, which I was not aware existed.
Eric has changed rooms.
Yes.
Lab group 1.
Yeah, wait, didn't I just see you?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get as much face time as possible. On the studio front, a session I would highly recommend people watching was a session given by Marcelo Pinheiro at Soliant. The session was called Solving Real World Use Cases with Claris Studio, Claris Connect, and FileMaker. And he didn't get into a ton of the details of here's how you go here to configure this, but they solved a very legitimate real world scenario with one of their customers. It was a series of departments at a university that was very much a blended system of Studio and FileMaker and using Connect as a connective tissue there. And part of what he talked through in the session was deciding which of those two systems, FileMaker and Studio, are the systems of record for which database objects. So he showed this ERD that showed the blended systems, and not all of the FileMaker objects existed over on the Studio side. And Studio owned some objects, and FileMaker owned other objects. And then he talked through how they integrated those. So it was very much using Studio to capture input and relay information for one set of users, and using FileMaker to do some more back office admin type stuff for a different set of users, all working together. That actually worked out to be a very performant, very scalable solution, and it was not contrived at all. I think in years past, some of the Studio examples that we've seen felt a little bit contrived. Like, yeah, okay, you can use Studio for that, but you could also just do it this other way instead. But the use case that he talked through in his session was not that at all. Very good. I would highly recommend anyone interested in using Studio and FileMaker together to watch that session.
Can you repeat the name of it again?
Solving real world use cases with Claris Studio, Claris Connect, and FileMaker.
Okay.
And even better, he used the Oxford comma in the session title. So,
All right. I'm just moving on to the next prompt here. And then this is a general new ideas, new techniques. Share something that wowed you. Did you come out of any sessions with new approaches, new skills, or ways to invigorate your workday? Did any sessions stand out to you, good or bad, and why? And were there enough sessions to choose from?
This was my first Engage, so I don't have anything else to base it on, but given that it's roughly a day shorter than it's been in previous years, I'm guessing there was probably more overlap than there maybe is typically in other engages. So I didn't run into, I mean, my personal sort of session track was not really interrupted by it. There's only probably one session that I'm just going to watch the video on because I wanted to see something else more. So it'd be nice to see it go to add a half day or a full day or something.
Yeah.
Or charge us less if you're short.
so I thought that the quality of the content in the sessions and the real world practical usefulness of all of it was, for me, the best Engage / DevCon since my first DevCon in 2018. And it may have been better than 2018, but 2018, I was still new to FileMaker, so I was learning stuff. So that was a lot of good stuff there. But I thought the overall content was great. Maybe that's because I went to a number of under the hood sessions. So there were some more nitty gritty details like that I found really interesting. One of the things that I really am pleased with and excited about was some of the stuff Clay talked about in his under the hood session, and some like strong, meaningful improvements to JSON performance in FileMaker under the hood, as well as their SQL parser, improving the performance and feature set within the SQL engine, and a variety of other things. In the past, sometimes at DevCon, I felt like Claris was saying, hey, look, we have this one new thing. Like, I'll pick on card windows. They're like, hey, we have card windows now. Like that whole DevCon was about card windows. And then the next year they were like, we now have card windows in WebDirect. Right. And it was like, okay, but like what else is new? And this year there was, hey, we have this and we have this and we have this, and all of this is working. It's not just pie in the sky stuff. And there was a long list of new features and performance improvements on existing things, and really future forward, positive, powerful things. So overall, I was like really pleased with it. And even with it only being a day and a half, 2 days long, I thought it was really good.
Y'all need to absolutely watch Clay's presentation. The JSON stuff is legit. It's very cool. It's going to make a huge difference for a lot of us going forward. So
Yeah.
Definitely check that out.
So I'm going to share something that I learned, and this is something that is, I went to Koji's. I don't know if anybody knows Koji's. He's from Japan, but he had one of the last sessions. I think it was one of the last sessions of DevCon before the closing session. The whole thing was just 4 or 5 tips. And the very first one that he came up with was something that I think everybody has dealt with. And I have never until this time, and unless I think he might have put it up on the community at one point, but I never saw that. So having seen this kind of blew my mind. And that is one of the things, is if you want to have a true Boolean checkbox, right, where it's, you check it and it becomes a 1, and you uncheck it and it becomes a 0. How best to do that when you're dealing with new records? And the answer to that was as elegant and amazing to me as for someone who knows FileMaker for as long as most of us have. Going in, looking and going, thinking, it's not something you would think of unless you really put your mind to it. Think like, what is the cleanest, most efficient way? And that is an auto enter, self equals 1. And that was it. It immediately starts off as a 0 as soon as the record is created. And as soon as you check 1, it becomes 1. And when you uncheck 1, it becomes 0 again. Nice,
I
right?
hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, very. Self equals 1. It's an auto enter calculation on the field. It's got to be a number field, obviously. Self equals 1. That's it.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I'll remember
yeah.
that.
Something for everybody to take home with it. So, anybody else have anything more about sessions and things that they learned? Anything? I don't see any hands up. I'm going to get back to my prompts again, and we'll go to the Austin format and just talk about it in general. We have the continuation of the choose your own hotel, take the bus to the facility, the parking. If you decide not to take a bus, what are the meeting space? Obviously, the 2-day format we touched on a little bit. The culinary offerings from the Apple chefs, and the 5th floor vendor space. Anybody want to talk about any of those? Taylor, let's have it.
Parking was great. I had no problem.
Okay, that was it.
That's
Yeah, well, Taylor on his own wheel.
I missed the JW Marriott. I missed the Lazy River.
Really, any of them. There's one of the nice things about it is when everyone is staying generally in the same hotel. I mean, obviously, you're always going to have people who didn't make it in time to get into the block of rooms that were reserved and may not be able to get a room when they do. And so they get, when it was in Vegas, get right next door, right? Things like that. But at the same time, when the conference is over for the day or for at the end of the last day, nobody's rushing to their hotel to get back to their room because their room is right there. if I need to go drop something off, I can do it, come right back down. And everybody congregated and it became a very sort of mobile, like a movable feast, right? Everybody was just moving around and we were all talking about whatever it is that we wanted to talk about. The other thing that I miss a lot, and I know that the vendors miss this a lot, is having the vendors right there where the food is in the cafeteria, wherever that setup was. Because you're going in, you're getting a cup of coffee, you're getting water, or you're getting food, and then you're going over and you're looking at what the vendors are doing and you're talking to them there. I know that is definitely not the same. We have them on their own floor, which granted, it was a better space than it was last year, where it was distributed over, I think, 3 different floors, 2 or 3.
That's right.
Floors, right? And they had more space to work with and it was less cramped, but at the same time, still not, I don't think it was ideal. And when you get a lot of people in there, it got really crowded really fast.
Yeah, the fifth floor was pretty much hopping pretty much all the time.
Yeah.
There was really good traffic up there.
Yeah.
A lot of people were coming up there where I would wander around and see, there's nothing going on in any of the lower floors, but there's a bunch of activity on the fifth floor.
Yeah.
So that at least was good.
And the
That's-
museum.
Right.
But I agree with you about it would have been nicer to have the larger room with food and
Yeah. Agreed.
the rest.
Hey, Greg, could you put your screen so we can see the props?
Oh, sure. I didn't realize I wasn't.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think I'll weigh in here for a second. So Harmonic had a booth, mostly just to show our support for Claris and just talk about what we do. I think I agree, better than last year, not great. I think those of us who have a long history of Engage or DevCon experience have challenges with the value proposition of the current reality of how this is done, right? The fact that it's only 2 days or really 1.5 by the time you take the keynote out, and the fact that it's not on site for where people are staying. We rented a house. That's where all of the Harmonic folks were at. So we had 8 employees down there and we were in a house and drove. So yeah, I think from my standpoint, this was the least likable part about it. That's not me prognosticating on whether it's likely to change. I think some of this is just the current nature of who Claris is and the nature of conferences these days. But yeah, not my favorite, better than last year, room for improvement.
But one thing I wanted to make sure everybody knew is that if you have thoughts about it, especially if you have constructive feedback for them, make sure you fill out the survey. And I think they actually sent that out in the email this week when they talked about the videos being imminently available. You're going to hit that survey and make sure that I actually got a chance to talk to a couple of key FileMaker folks while we were there. And we gave them some constructive feedback while we were at it. What was nice about it. So I didn't try to torpedo the relationship that developers have with FileMaker, but they were very open to receiving it too. At the end of the day, we all know that their hands are tied on a lot of this as well, right? They're having to answer to their corporate oversight, if you will, and that is going to limit some of their choices. That being said, it could have been a whole lot worse. It could have just been a generic conference center that we got and no hotel attached. It's just like basically a WeWork version of conference center kind of thing. And we would have ended up with a whole lot of different stores. I will say that as far as the food wasn't always like exactly what you would have wanted, right? You got only a couple of options at lunch, but I will say that Cafe Max was just something to look at, was it not?
Yeah.
Whew. The money was everywhere to be seen in that place. They spent some money and it really showed. I noticed there was thoughtfulness and so many details in that building itself. I don't know if anybody knows, but the ceiling tiles they were square. They were bigger squares than this. But any conference room you go into, there's all kinds of stuff that you got your recessed lighting, you've got your Wi-Fi, you've got your fire protection, all that. Every single thing that was up there was in this very center of every square. Boom. There were no exceptions to that. If it was round, if it was square, it didn't matter. It was all in that. And if anybody went into the bathrooms, all the bathroom stalls, it's the first time I think I've ever been in a public bathroom stall where the edges were sealed so you couldn't see through. Nobody was peeking in. That's nice, right? I mean, in a public, of course, it makes it where you have to kind of look for feet now to see but they do actually have lock indicators on the door too, which is really nice as well. So
Everybody that I ran into, Apple campus was super accommodating and friendly. And In some cases, psychic, I turn around, maybe had an expression on my face like I had a question, and sometimes there were just people there sort of looking out for people like me.
Right.
And so you didn't have to go wandering around trying to get help or anything.
That was nice. Yeah.
Facilities were great, training rooms were amazing, tech wise and everything like you mentioned. So.
Yeah. And for anybody who wasn't there, the facility is mostly white. There might be a little bit of like light gray there. And so one of the things that I didn't notice until I think it was like day or 2 or 3 is how many people are around. They're just innocuous. You don't notice them, but they're out there like sweeping up and cleaning things up as you're moving through the place. It's not like they're pushing a cart around or anything like that. They're just walking around, keeping the place clean. They're going up and down the stairs, they're polishing the rails and cleaning the rails off, and everything just seemed like it was really well kept. So that kind of made me feel like, hey,
Apple ninjas just kind of dropping.
exactly.
And then they're gone.
It's so good to be back in person. I missed it when it was gone.
Yeah, makes a big deal. It's the ability to come out of it and then you're in contact with people who you may not even talk to them throughout the year, but you see them the next year. And you're almost like picking up right where you left off, right? And then talking about, hey, what did you do this year? And it really helps, especially if you are a developer in business for yourself, like Taylor and I, where we are always looking for that thing to give us that momentum, that little boost, right? Like, where am I moving next? What is the direction I'm going?
So Taylor, you'd mentioned that guy, Kaz McLemore, and I had a chance just to sit down and talk with him. And I remember asking him, how would you like FileMaker to be, say, just a little bit better? Are there any gotchas or just little small problems that it would sure be nice you think is like reachable for Claris? And he says, I don't know that they exist because I do everything in the web viewer. And so it's like, these foundational problems that FileMaker has, and I mean, once in a while they get around to them. It was interesting to see that perspective. They were like, well, this guy has just found a way around all of them. Like, he's figured out version control. He's figured out just how basic the script workspace is and any problem with that. And I remember hearing from another guy that Brian and I were talking to, he had the opposite perspective, which I'm sure he made good use of, like the web viewer and any sort of JavaScript you inject in it. He says, it's simply not an excuse. These are still things that Claris should be working on. And it was interesting to me. It's like maybe a concern, but I also understand it's a business they're running and they can only do so much at a time. It also felt a little bit weird coming out of that keynote and seeing something announced specifically within the FileMaker UI, which is cool, but it's like, why wasn't this here 15 years ago?
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. So.
Yeah.
I did some freelance work for a number of years before I came to Harmonic. During that time, it felt like a drought period for me. There were features that I wanted to be there that were not there, and it was getting in the way of me building stuff that either my clients wanted or that I just wanted to be able to do. And so I was starting to retreat from the platform a little bit, sort of hanging on with one hand, but it's a good problem. More recently, probably starting with OData and maybe the data API possibly, but around 2016, 17, 18, things seem to get a lot better for people like me and probably for a number of other people that have been waiting on features to build more modern stuff. So it's a good problem for me to come back from an Engage and have a long list of stuff to work on and play with instead of just 1 or 2 key features like the card window thing. So I think I consider that to be a good problem because I've still got weeks of stuff to go through from the training day and the session.
And one thing I did want to bring up that nobody's brought up yet is that we got to the FileMaker world said goodbye to Andrew Lecates.
He's
retiring. He's retired. Well, is he retiring for real? Or is he
Yes, really
Okay.
retiring.
Well, good
Also,
for him.
Steve Link retired.
Oh, okay.
Steve Link retired the following Monday.
Which was obviously a big deal. He's been a fixture in FileMaker for long before I was ever
Founding
involved.
partners. Yeah.
And then one's back too, which is another.
Rick Coleman's back, FMPug.
Yeah, very excited about that.
Andy's job, so.
Yeah, I saw his name in the app, right? In the Engage app, where if you looked in any of the notes that were coming out or the messages that were coming through, it was Rick Kalman, the platform evangelist. I'm like, I really appreciate everybody being here this month. This was a great session. I think we all brought some very interesting ideas to the table here and had some very fascinating things to talk about. I'm looking forward to next month's session, which is what? Do we know?
Actually, we need to talk about that.
Okay, which is we need to talk about.
I think we need a presentation. So if someone has a burning presentation, get with either of us
Right.
or Fred.
So if anybody out there has some thoughts,
If not, I may be.
this is your opportunity. Right.
Okay.
Or maybe we just go ahead and crib somebody's presentation from Engage, pass it off as our own. Okay, everybody. Well, we're gonna go ahead and stop the session here. Everybody have a great week, great month, great weekend. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.